That concludes our speakers. We now open the floor to questions from the audience. Yes, please. Please also mention which part of the organization you represent. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Maninder Singh. I'm with the Sikh Federation. I'd just like to start off by thanking the speakers for their thoughtful comments on the right to self-determination, the importance of decolonization, and the historical context and ongoing struggle for the Scottish people for self-determination has been both insightful and inspiring in this session. As the speakers have all noted, this is a common struggle amongst people who have been resisting colonialism and fighting to restore their sovereignty all over the world. In the case of the Sikh community, asserting our right to self-determination and restoring an independent Sikh homeland caused that after a deceitful British annexation in 1849 and ongoing Indian occupation since 1947. It's meant widespread human rights violations, enforced disappearances, torture, arbitrary detention, to the assassination of political activists that are living in exile. Such is the case of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, who was assassinated in 2023, and the attempted assassination of Sikh lawyer Gurpatwant Singh Pannu in the United States in the same year. I'd like to actually just ask a question that is particularly focused on the commonality of these struggles. I just want to note the case of Jagtar Singh Johal, who was a Scottish national born and raised in Dumbarton. He's been arbitrarily detained, tortured in India for the last 8 years, and the British government has made no meaningful attempt to actually have him released. And all for the sake of him fighting for human rights, Sikh sovereignty, and self-determination. So in the context of this, maybe my question is for Mr. Murray, but any of the panelists, is how can people striving for self-determination work together and support each other's movements effectively in the face of such horrific torture, detention on behalf of states that are trying to quash their legitimate dissent? And inside and outside of the UN structure, which has its mechanisms but also has its limitations, how are people able to continue on this path and support each other in their sovereignty and self-determination struggles and see their struggles as a larger movement for decolonization globally and ending occupation over lands and people?
I'd start by saying I am aware of the individual case you mentioned, and there are people in Scotland who are aware and who are campaigning on that subject. And unfortunately, the British government really very little prioritises consular assistance to people who fall foul of governments with which the British government wishes to maintain friendly relations. There have been appalling cases of British citizens detained, often tortured, by states across the globe, where the British government has done nothing whatsoever to try to help them. And very often it's because those people come from a people or an ethnic minority which the British government doesn't particularly value, and are held prisoner by states who the British government wish to maintain friendly relations with. And there have been, and strangely enough, quite often those people are Scots, because Scots have, Scots have large diaspora. So I am aware of the case. I was very struck because I attended the C24 session in New York earlier this year, because, as you heard, we've given notice of submitting a petition for inclusion of Scotland as a non-self-governing territory. So we attended the committee hearings to get to understand the structures, get to understand how it works, and get to know the committee members. And I was very struck by the feeling of solidarity and comradeship between representatives of a number of communities there. And indeed, I ended up giving a talk to the committee on behalf of the Kanak people of New Caledonia, which I hadn't been expecting to do when I first went to New York, as a result of some of the contacts that were made there. So I do think it's very important that people have a feeling of global solidarity. I'm not going to comment on the particular case of Sikh efforts for self-determination, other than to say that it's yet another of the atrocious legacies of the British Empire, and the British annexation of the Sikh lands in the 1840s was a dreadful act of bad faith. And to this day, the main jewel in the British crown was stolen from the Sikhs. One of the many crimes of empire, the young emperor of the Sikhs at that time was kidnapped as a small child and taken and held for the rest of his life, effectively prisoner in the United Kingdom. So I'm deeply aware of the history, and it always amazes me how many conflicts in the world go back. When there was recent instability in Kenya, the roots of that went back to dispossession of one group of people by the British to seize their land, and they were then dispossessed and put onto the lands of another people, and conflict arose between those two people. But it was the British who were the fundamental cause of it all. And it's fascinating when you trace back these conflicts, just how much damage the British Empire has done in the world, which still continues to this day. But I welcome the call for solidarity, and part of the answer is we meet at things like this and get to know each other.
Thank you, Greg. Now I pass on to the gentleman to your left. Right.
Thank you for giving me a floor. I don't speak English very well, but my colleague helped me translate. اسمي أيمن عقيل من مصر، رئيس مؤسسة معهد للسلام والتنمية وحقوق الإنسان ونائب رئيس الإيكوسوك الأفريقي لقطاع شمال أفريقيا.
So I just have been translating. He is Mr. Ayman Aqil. He is the chairman of Knife for Peace Development and Human Rights Association, and also he is the deputy president of the African Union ECOSOC.
دولتي مصر كانت دولة محتلة لمئات السنين، أكثر من احتلال، والقارة الإفريقية نفسها هي قارة كانت محتلة وما زالت محتلة. دول نهبت ثرواتها كما تنهب بريطانيا ثروات اسكتلندا.
Actually, my country, Egypt, was colonized by British crown, of course, and also many African countries. So we understand your situation, and also our wealth and natural resources were stolen and taken by them. So that's why we understand what's happening in Scotland.
يمكن احنا موجودين هنا داخل هذه القاعة رغم اختلاف الدين والعقيدة والشريعة والجنسية واللغة، لكن بيجمعنا حاجة واحدة وهي إيماننا بحق الشعوب في الاستقلال وتقرير مصيرها وحكم نفسها.
So all of us here are having different backgrounds from different races and religions and nationalities, but we all here agree on one thing, which is the self-determination.
يمكن أنا أول مرة أتكلم عن اسكتلندا وما كنتش أعرف حاجة عنها إلا من خلال الإعلام والأفلام وفيلم القلب الشجاع لميل جيبسون، ولكن النهارده أنا فعلا رغم إن هذه الإعلام زي ما قال البروفيسور هي إنتاج أمريكي، لكن بالفعل إحنا مؤمنين بحقكم في الاستقلال وحقكم في تقرير مصيركم.
So actually it's my first time to talk about Scotland. I didn't know a lot about Scotland before, just from the media and from some movies like Braveheart. And of course we understand that many of things were just produced by the Americans maybe or the British.
يمكن بشكر الزملاء سارة وبشمهندس اللي دعوني على هذا اللقاء عشان اسمعكم واتقابل معاكم.
And I really thank Mrs. Sarah and the engineer at the back because they are the ones who invited us to attend this event. Thank you so much.
وطبعا ثانك يو. وطبعا بنشكر المنظمين لهذا اللقاء، المنظمات اللي اتاحت لنا الفرصه ان احنا نتواجد ونتكلم.
And of course, thank you for the organizers who invited us on this panel and organized everything. Thank you for this important discussion.
مؤسسة ماعت معناها ماعت هي إلهة الحق والعدل عند القدماء المصريين، فلذلك إحنا رسالتنا هو الإيمان بالعدالة وتحقيق العدالة مش بس في مصر لكن في العالم كله.
Actually, our organization, which is Ma'at is an Egyptian goddess. So the ancient Egyptian goddess of justice. So that's why that's our slogan, because we believe that all people need justice all over the world.
ولذلك احنا يعني مستعدين ان احنا نضع ايدينا في ايديكم لتحقيق العداله وتحقيق الاستقلال الكامل للسكان.
So that's why we really would love to cooperate with you in your goal and to achieve this together.
واتمنى ان انا اخد الصوره التذكاريه مع معالي السفير بالزي الرسمي.
And it will really be my honor to have a photo with you with the official costume of yours.
Thank you.
Okay, the lady in blue, you now have the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm Nisha Beres, representing Tamils in the occupied territories of Tamil Nadu. And for the people who may not know where it is a colonized Tamil territory in Sri Lanka, a genocidal country who made at least 146,679 Tamils enforced disappeared in 2009. The right to self-determination is universal. It cannot be selectively applied. Scotland's case demonstrates how international law provides peaceful avenues for the people to decide their political future. Yet even Scotland faces obstacles, especially from the United Kingdom, which resists these aspirations. For Tamils, the situation is even harsher. The very same United Kingdom, while acting as penholder on Sri Lanka at the United Nations, avoids naming us as the victims of genocide and continues to shield Sri Lanka from accountability. Scotland's challenges show how difficult self-determination can be even within democracy. For Tamils in Sri Lanka, the situation is even harsher. Instead of negotiating legal pathways, we are still fighting for recognition of our survival, identity, dignity, and rights under international law. In this context, I'd like to raise 3 questions to the panelists. International law affirms that the right to self-determination is universal, yet in practice, its application often depends on political interests, as we see in the way the United Kingdom respond both to Scotland's aspirations and the Tamil people's demands. So how can we ensure that this principle is applied consistently without double standards, whether in Europe or in Asia? And secondly, when Scotland expresses its aspiration to self-determination, it is at least debated within a democratic framework. For Tamils, invoking the same right is met with criminalization, liberalization, accusation of separatism and terrorism, often encouraged by the very same United Kingdom that controls the narrative of Sri Lanka at the UN. How can the international community address such double standards without undermining the universality of international law? And thirdly, and last, Scotland's peaceful pursuit of self-determination shows the importance of culture, language, and democratic expression for people like the Tamils, still confronted with mass graves, enforced disappearance, and militarization. What lessons can be drawn from Scotland's experience, and while also recognition of common obstacles we face from powerful states such as the United Kingdom? And I want to finish on this note that I admire Mr. Murray's guts to wear his traditional clothes, as I am also doing that, and thank you for being so vocal for other people like us.
I was just would any of the panelists would like to answer?
Can I say something?
Yes, sure.
I think that's a crucial question, and one that everybody should hear, should be considering and trying to find the answers for. And which is why I opened my presentation with this call for action, that we do not we cease to put political pragmatism above international law, above what is clear and just and right. Human beings look for, we very often we probably won't get an ideal situation, or you have one state that doesn't want to offend another, and so we end up with situations like that of the Tamil people. And I just want to say that 27 years ago, I visited Madras and was invited to a meeting, actually illegal meeting of the Tamil Tigers, where I was shown films of what, with many other people, what was going on. So I have been aware of that, and it has not changed. It has been going on for a very long time, and it is still a violation of everything we think of as being human rights. So I think we've reached a point where we're looking at, as I said, we're looking at an act of genocide playing out on the world stage in full view with impunity, with no action being taken. I think this is the point at which the international community has to come together and has to instruct those who make these decisions, those who sit in meetings and decide what's pragmatic, that it is time to uphold the principles that all peoples are entitled to have in place: justice, self-determination, freedom from torture and arbitrary detention, basic human rights, and most of all, the right to be who they are. And that this must happen now, because if not, we don't have a tomorrow. So it's going to be up to us, I think.
I just want to add one very quick point to that, specifically, which is the law which is currently being enacted by London against supporters of Palestine Action, entirely peaceful people. Well over 1,000 have been arrested on terrorism charges within the last month. But that law was previously used, and in fact was quoted in court as by the government in justification of what they're doing, was its use previously against protesters for the Tamils. And in fact, many Tamil people were arrested in the UK and charged with terrorism offences, despite not being involved in violence whatsoever, for supporting Tamil liberation. And that's actually playing out now in the court cases about Palestine.
Just to go back a couple of points, I think in terms of supporting other communities with the same aspirations, very important. And in my research in Scottish independence, my background was developing theoretical frameworks. So I developed a theoretical framework on the socio-political determinants of decolonisation independence, which is available. It's something that we've used in our work, but it's available to other countries, other states, other peoples to analyse. It's a 9-part theory, and it provides evidence for colonisation. So it has all these dimensions I mentioned today and more: culture, language, and so on, constitution, sovereignty, self-determination. That's available also through, it's a book, but it's available in journal articles through Towson University International Relations Journal, or maybe the chair can, any advice, any interest can be made through the chair to access these journals. The second thing that I wanted to mention was partition was part of the British policy in many places, including India, including Cyprus, including Ireland. And it has also been mentioned in the context of Scotland. So partition is a colonial procedure or imperial procedure, something we are well aware of. The third aspect, going back to our Egyptian friend and colleague here, is that it's worth remembering that the name Scotland derives from Queen Scotia, daughter of Akhenaton and wife of Gaitalos, who during the exodus from Egypt moved to Valyria. And the archaeological records there demonstrate this was a big exodus. But the descendants of Queen Scotia came to Ireland, which was called Scotia originally, and Scotia Major, and Scotland became known as Scotia Minor. So Scotland is named after an Egyptian daughter of the Pharaoh. So we have a close connection.
Thank you for the thoughtful answers. Also, just a point of reminder, yes, feel free to email our organisation, and we can disseminate your questions to our panelists as well, and vice versa. We now move on to the gentleman on my left with his question.
Thank you so much. Thank you for tackling the issue of self-determination. I must admit that all the presentation were full-fledged. We have seen different perspectives in terms of human rights issues. We have seen social, economic rights, and etc. dealing with the issue of self-determination. We have seen also, I must admit that this is the first time I hear another perspective, because we didn't hear that problem previously. We admitted, even if at the level of the international mechanism of human rights here in Geneva or in New York. Today, I come up with a vision that Scotland, and I'm sorry for that, they still facing in terms of discrimination, because I have seen some presentation of that. Discrimination in terms of clothes, discrimination in terms of media. We have seen the example of a channel. The inventor was Scotlandish, but actually there is no TV for Scotland. We have seen the use of anti-terrorist law, which is dangerous. You said recently it was applied on people who advocate for the Palestinian issue. We have seen so many different perspectives, and this is good. At least today we are enlightened. We are having a broader picture of what is happening in Scotland. Second element and second axe is that the international, as you know, Declaration of Human Rights, UN Declaration, the international mechanism of human rights, the international humanitarian law, and the international law. And in addition to the African Charter, I come from Africa, and I work with the African Commission on Human People's Rights. And one of the bases that the African Commission was created is on the self-determination of the population of Africa. Since Africa has undergone very serious colonization, you know that colonizers used natural resources, divided countries into micro states. So all these elements, that is the African Charter, support the self-determination of the African people, and also the self-determination, we support it effectively. We support not only the political, but there are also other perspectives of self-determination, which is this self-determination for development, the self-determination for social, the self-determination of culture. We need to conserve our culture. Indigenous people, minorities all over the world, wherever you go, minorities are facing discrimination against the way they close. Maybe we are at our level, we don't favor the division of country in Africa, but we support self-determination. At the end, I have just one question. Joe, he was speaking and he was witnessing the referendum of 2014. And I don't know what was the reason behind the vote. Is it media only that push people to vote for integration, or is there any other factors that was behind that? was not present to monitor the election. And I thank you so much.
Obviously, want to answer, but I think the media was the most important factor. You know, for me, as someone who's monitored elections elsewhere, I've never seen any election with such a one-sided media. We didn't have one of all the newspapers in Scotland at that time. There was no newspaper that supported independence, not one, for example, and they were all radically against it, and and they were portraying scare stories that were put out. People were told that they would lose their old age pensions, that the Scottish state would have no money, and that pensioners would all lose their pension, get no. And this was put out by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I'm not meaning, these kind of extreme scare tactics were employed and were amplified without question by the media. And also promises were made. Promise was made and published on the front page of all papers, signed by the leaders of the three main parties of the United Kingdom, that if people voted no, they would get huge new powers for the Scottish Parliament in terms particularly of macroeconomic control, more resources staying in Scotland, all this. And this was published in the last 2 or 3 days before the referendum. And of course none of it actually happened after they won the vote. But there were irregularities in the administration, particularly in vote counting and those kind of things, where we didn't have independent monitors to check. But for me, it was the terrifying of the population and having a media that slavishly amplified those fears and stated, a great many things which are simply not true. That was my reading of it.
Just to add, in my research into the situation, what I mentioned in my paper today was there is a psychology associated with colonialism and the pathology that goes with that. So we have to remember that the people develop a dependency complex in a dependency. And therefore, don't forget also the anti-colonial initiative was called Project Fear. So the media was a very important part of that. But the vote, the no vote actually was split in two areas, according to my research and other research. One is the population coming from outside Scotland, which is a big population due to settler occupation, in a sense, it's called in other areas, is anti-independence. 80%, 75, 80% of the settlers coming in, and it's the same in other places like New Caledonia and so on, is anti-independence. The other half of the no vote is, I would say, is people with developing the colonial mindset, which is also known as internalized racism. We call it the Scottish cultural cringe. But they have a denial of oppression. They deny oppression, they deny oppressive acts. They think the oppression, the condition of the Scottish people and economy is deserved. And they align with the colonial mindset, which is has a racial dimension as well. So this is particularly middle class community. In post-colonial theory, it's the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie have this mindset, the colonizer. And it's the same in French colonies, British colonies, American colonies as well. So the colonial mindset, very important. Settler occupation, very important, as well as the media blitz.
Thank you very much. We now hand the floor to Lady in White.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jerome. My name is Lizzie Cesar. I'm from Bonaire Human Rights Organization. Where are we, Bonaire? Bonaire is 50 miles from Venezuela in the Caribbean Ocean. We have similar problems or issues like Scotland. We were embedded in the Dutch constitution in 2010 without the permission of the Bonairean people. In 2014 and 15, my colleague here, Mr. James Finney's, protested. A banker left his job as a banker and went outside on a bench to protest, protesting so that people can have a choice for a referendum. The people never had a choice when the annexation, when they annexed Bonaire. So he decided to sit on the bench for 222 days without going home, without just sleeping in his car in the night, and voted for so people can have a referendum. In that referendum, it took about 8 months on the bench, and then they decided to give the island a referendum. Before that, he was they tried to assassinate him 3 times, and they jailed him once. But he survived, and the referendum came. In that referendum, 66% of the Bonairean people rejected the Dutch constitutional status that we were in. The question was, are you agreeing with that status, yes or no? 65% voted no. Despite that, the Dutch government refused to accept the no and continue with the annexation. We met Mr. Murray in June at the C24. We met, and the first time I heard about Scotland, and to be honest, we were very, very shocked. We were very shocked because we never realized after 200 or 400 years, a country can actually come on the international scene and ask to be released on the non-self-governing territories. So I have 2 questions, and just that I want, before I ask the 2 questions, I want everyone in the room to promise me, or if they can promise him, that when you speak about the British colony, the American colonies, just include the Dutch colonies, because the Dutch has colonies. Actually, in the Caribbean, we have more colony dependency in the Caribbean Sea than any part of the world. We have the British colony, we have the French colony, we have the Dutch colony, and the American colony. So, just not to forget the Dutch, because the Dutch portray a very liberal offset in the international community. While we are here, our organization has special consultative status of the United Nations, and we are here in Geneva, not for the convention, the 60th Convention of Human Rights, but for the CESCR hearings. Holland is put before the United Nations to answer social, economical, and cultural rights of people of Bonaire and the Dutch islands in the Caribbean. So that's why we are here. We were last night handed a flyer by one gentleman in the back, and then we were surprised of it, even though we knew it was happening, and we were happy to be here. 2 questions for our legal lawyers in the room. One question is, shouldn't it be a referendum for the people to vote whether to be put on the list of non-self-governing territories prior to the request, or by International Court of Justice an order to say that? And what was the C24 opinion on Scotland, the constitutional status?
It's international law, so I am not qualified to answer. We don't get taught it in Scottish universities, Craig, as you well know.
The C24 doesn't yet have an opinion because we haven't, the question hasn't been formally put to them. We've written to them, informing them of the question, and we've started to get to know the members and get to know the Secretariat. And I've, as you saw when I was there in New York, I was lobbying C24 committee members. The C24 traditionally has been resistant to adding countries to the to the list. It's seen its job, if you like, as finishing its work, as winding up its portfolio, getting all these countries decolonised and closing the list. It's traditionally not been keen to add new countries, but while we were there in New York, there was a very, very lively statement about putting Puerto Rico, which is not currently on the list, and that they're actively considering that one. I think the notion of Scotland, which is annexed by a P5 member, the notion of Scotland being added to the list came as quite a shock to some people, to be honest, when it was first introduced to them. And so I think this is a period which is going to take some time. It's going to take a few years to play out. I think it's for the C24 to decide, and they will have to make a recommendation to the General Assembly, which will ultimately decide. But that's the path which we are going through, and I think that's the correct path. There's no mechanism because as a non-self-governing territory, you are by definition not a state, so you don't have access to go to the ICJ. You don't have standing, so there's no mechanism to go to the ICJ as a non-self-governing territory. So I think we are using the correct mechanism. As to having a referendum on whether we should be doing it in the first place, well, again, the British government wouldn't allow us to have the referendum, so it's a moot question. I don't think it requires a referendum. It's a question of fact, whether you're a self-governing colony or not. And I think we're going to the correct experts to determine that.
But very quickly, can the British government block that because they have a veto on the Security Council? Would that apply to things like the C24 process?
No.
Okay.
Thank you very much for everyone's contribution. Now we move to Lady in Black glasses.
My name is Deirdre McConnell from the Tamil Centre for Human Rights. First, I'd like to say I've learned a lot from the contributions here. I'm Celtic heritage myself, but I've learned a lot, and now I know why Britain doesn't have a written constitution. And that's very interesting. I have a personal history of being involved with the Tamil struggle for the last 30 years, so I've experienced much in terms of UK and Sri Lanka, and then in terms of trying to label. Apparently I get a lot of money for coming here and being a human rights activist, where I don't, because I'm a well-paid lobbyist, and I'm not, but I do what I do because I believe, and I've seen, and I've been there several times. I want to make two points and then a question on a different, related, more to do with what's happening in Scotland now, something very positive. In 1997, there was the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Edinburgh. I don't know if anybody here was there. We chartered a train from London to Edinburgh and had demonstrations. The Scottish people were absolutely fantastic. In Prince's Garden, the Tamil flag and the Scottish flag were raised together by MPs and the people. When the train arrived in Waverley Station, a pigeon got stuck on one of the airlines and there were some sparks. And then immediately the intelligence, whatever, around said that these are the terrorists coming. And this was a train full of elderly people, children, with flags and information leaflets, and then doing cultural dances and so on in events. The Chogam Scottish organisers were absolutely superb, and they understood, and they joined us in the march. So, and the Tamil people were very appreciative of that. That was 30 years ago. Over 30 years we've been coming here, we're still coming here. Currently there's a resolution. It's going to be voted on the 6th of October, possibly. Very difficult because there are many countries, some countries in Africa, some countries nearby Sri Lanka that don't actually appreciate the self-determination and genocide argument. So I urge people that are doing anything in the Human Rights Council here to bear that in mind and try and encourage countries to really go for the resolution. It's not strong enough, but it is recognising that there should be accountability for the genocide that was occurred in 2009. People here might be interested that a human rights lawyer Itel Mack has written an article. He's an Israeli human rights lawyer against what Israel is doing, saying that what happened in 2009, which was the demolition of the whole internal structure of a de facto state of the Tamils in the north and east of the island of Sri Lanka, was actually demolished in the same way. Hospitals bombed, schools bombed, etc., etc. It was a devastating time in 2009. Straight after that, the president of Sri Lanka, Ban Ki-moon, there was a resolution that was put forward by Sri Lanka because the Europeans weren't quick enough to put a resolution forward denouncing the human rights violation, the genocide of between 70,000 and 140,000 people in a few days. And the Sri Lankan resolution went by with a lot of support because they said they were going to be accountable. Have they been over the last 16 years? No, not at all. And they said in that resolution no human rights violations were committed, and it was an absolute genocide. Itel Mack, in his article now, is saying that Israel is using Sri Lanka as a model. So early on in the 83 anti-Tamil pogroms, when 3,000 Tamils were killed in the island of Sri Lanka, just after that, the next year, Sri Lanka didn't have any relations with Israel, but had an Israeli interest unit in the US Embassy in Colombo. From then on, the arms link between Sri Lanka and Israel, with also Britain included, yes, absolutely. There's a lot written about it, I won't say any more, but basically Sri Lankan genocide is now being used because the world did not come out strongly against it. We were here, the Sri Lankans were running around to do their own resolution, and the ambassador here in the Human Rights Council got enough goodwill, give them the benefit of the doubt, political space, political time, give them time. Okay, 70 years already, but then we've had 16 years since then. So even now, this is being debated. The other day there was a consultation meeting on it. Okay, so I wanted to, so whether the solidarity links between Tamils and Scots can kind of build on the 1997 beginnings and since. Then I want to come on, I'm interested in human rights in many dimensions, also in education. Scotland is incredible. There is this UNICEF-promoted rights respect in schools where you're teaching international humanitarian law, international human rights law to 3-year-olds upwards. And I understand that all the schools in Scotland are doing that. In UK, far less. And so that's tremendous. Your Macha, Liz Lochhead, has written a poem called Trouble Is Not My Middle Name. So the tribunals where children have got involved in trouble and so on, they actually have juries or the local people to say, well, isn't it the origins and the cause and effect that's produced the behaviour, not the behaviour itself, to criminalise children? My question to you is, how did you manage to do that? Working in England with 9,500 permanent exclusions of children over last year, which is a horrific number. You just don't have that in Scotland. How did you manage through your legal system to promote the child rights despite what was being said about the children's rights? You trying to put your bill forward and being somehow. And just lastly, in that building over there was a big art exhibition from the Parliament, the Parliament for Children's Rights in Scotland a few years ago, with all the drawings that children had done. That was about 5 or 6 years ago. So congratulations on that, and thank you.
I must say I've got 2 children that have just been through the education system, and that is absolutely news to me.
And also now the gentleman who might give you.
Thank you very much. I will say the same thing. I'm Kirvaram from the Tamil Center for
I apologize. Someone wants to respond.
Okay, carry on.
Can everybody hear me? I'm Dr. Jenny Martin. I'm the CEO of Measure Rights Global and a Glasgow girl, human rights and women health strategist. I'm going to make some comments after the gentleman has spoken, but it's just to respond to what you were saying. So in 2014, we established, or Scotland established UNICEF Scotland, and they have been fundamental in advancing the Convention on the Rights of the Child throughout Scottish law, in schools, and we're actually, in UNICEF Scotland, is the only devolved UNICEF branch within the UK, and it's fundamentally linked to the Commonwealth Games. So aspects of that include education, sexual and reproductive health rights, supporting autonomy, advancing the rights of the girl, and also the right to and the importance of sport, which is based on, of course, the fundamentals of set games. So I do agree that not everything is always implemented appropriately, but I think that what it shows is the power of utilising platforms like the Commonwealth Games to establish legacy systems like UNICEF Scotland that can advance some of these rights, and they do bring the international treaties to Scottish people, because I also agree that it took me to be educated outside of Scotland and then to work on the global stage with the United Nations in several capacities to understand what our rights were as the Scottish people.
Another gentleman.
So, thank you very much. I am Kriparan from the same Tamil Center for Human Rights. I have one to say information, other one I have a question for legal expert of Scottish legal experts. The information, you see, we come here for the last 3 decades or more. When you look at the Tamil conflict, we call it Tamil-Eelam conflict, you see, when we came here, the people from Eritrea, East Timor, South Sudan, also Khalistan, they worked with us from 80. But they all got their referendum through Security Council. We Tamils, even today, unable to move, even this is with very difficult thing, greater difficult thing, we have come to the Human Rights Council. We don't know why, who is obstructing, because one reason I must say openly here, you see, for the Scotland referendum to be defeated, there are Scots working against this referendum. Like that, there are Tamils who were working against this, and I call them, like dog in the manger, human in the manger. They obstruct everything. So, that is one point. Secondly, also India. Secondly, I must say, I have a good question to all the legal experts in Scotland. You know very well, there is no possibility in the near future for another referendum. Will you do UDI? This is my question. Thank you very much.
The gentleman's question is whether Scotland would declare make a unilateral declaration of independence. There are Scots who feel that should happen, and because nothing has happened for so long, because people are in great distress. There's real serious poverty. All of the trades and the jobs and the industries have been moved out of Scotland, and there is real despair in the country and real poverty. And so there are quite a few people who say, well, we should declare independence unilaterally and the international community would welcome us. The fact is, however, that even if, as the International Court of Justice ruled in the case of Kosovo, a unilateral declaration of independence is not unlawful, so long as a nation or a territory is considered by the international community, rightly or wrongly, to be an integral part of a lawful sovereign state. For that to declare unilateral, declare independence unilaterally leads to being contested. So the independence of Kosovo is currently contested, I think, about 10 countries. And so the Kosovo passport isn't recognised in many places. There are agreements and treaties that they cannot enter into. They're caught between a rock and a hard place. And the guarantees and promises that were given by those countries that were encouraging Kosovo people to make that declaration disappeared once the effect they desired had been achieved. So we're trying to explain to people in Scotland, we have to establish that which is true about Scotland, that we're not, because we're not part of a lawful sovereign state, we are annexed. The rights of Scotland to self-determination fall under the rights and to be declared fall under the rights to decolonisation.
Therefore, the first step for us is to be declared, to be recognised as a non-self-governing territory, so that we do not fall into that trap.
So, and now we circle back to question.
Hi everyone. It's actually more of a comment, and I think I'm probably the last person with the question, so maybe this would be possibly, potentially. So this is mainly about my lived experience of working at the international level, being a Scottish woman in particular. So just a few comments. Thank you very much to the panel as the organising committee for chairing this. It is so wonderful to actually hear Scottish voices sitting in Geneva, because I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the United Nations in New York, in Geneva, around the world, and been the only person that actually sounds like me. And often been mistaken for being Irish, which I think is lovely as well, because they have a lovely accent. But my organisation also contributed to the Human Rights Bill consultation. We advocated strongly for the Convention of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women to be included, and also the Convention of the Rights of the Child. It was upsetting to see that had been stalled, and then not a lot of information come out of it, but that was also because we're not given the information and things aren't visible, so it's very difficult for activists and advocates to continue to push when we can't get information, and this is something I think is controlled by the UK government as well. I was educated in Scotland. I did my undergraduate there. We are very lucky to have free university education, which is a blessing. Our curse is that we don't have jobs for individuals like myself, so we're suffering brain drain, which we see in a lot of other countries where everyone's gravitating towards centralised countries that hold more power, economic power, structural, social power, in order to have employment. So we're educating individuals and then we don't have the role for them, so how can we shape the next generation, how can we influence people? It's a really important point. And also having to know I've worked in Zimbabwe and India, spent a lot of time in these countries and fantastic partners, but I see a lot of the challenges when people are speaking about what they're experiencing. Tools that were used by the UK government to divide and control and conquer, they're still very much alive and present in our Scottish community, whether we see it or not. That is something that is a huge concern. Microaggressions, for example, I'm constantly told that I'm too direct and I'm too strong, and I'm actually just fundamentally too Scottish to be leading it with London. And I'm not going to change. Like, I'm a Glasgow girl at heart. That's never going to change. So if you're going to police my culture, how can I actually feed into the UK and just outside the southeast of England? The north of England, people who have regional accents, there's a lot of discrimination in that sense, and that is a method of control, as a lot of you will be able to relate to within this room. So I will wrap it up, I promise. I believe that the Scottish people, we have the right to shape and advance our own rights, economic, social, environmental. I think that we should have the opportunity to be able to be in such forums. I know that the channels of ECOSOC, other UN or diplomatic channels are not actually really that visible, so you don't see a lot of people that are able to get into the space to see what the opportunities are and to be able to contribute. So there really remains a fundamental lack of visibility and understanding of Scotland within the UN system. For example, when I was at the Commission on the Status of Women, when I've been at CPD, when I've been at UNGA, colleagues from delegations, member state delegations, were surprised that Scotland wasn't a member state because they actually didn't know that Scotland was part of the UK. So this invisibility really means that our perspectives and rights are not being adequately heard or understood, and then we cannot show up for ourselves, but we also cannot show up in political declarations and treaties, and we have no voting power in the context of global rights. And as you've heard from the speakers today, we stand against many of the atrocities that are happening around the world right now, and yet we have the voting power to be able to stand against it in the international courts. So that's a problem. So just to wrap up, I honestly believe that we, the Scottish people, who I'm going to speak on behalf of, we should have the right to attain our basic human rights within our own country and on the international stage. we should have the right to decide our own political future. And we also have the right to contribute to advancing a better society and world with the poly crises that are happening. We stand with and beside many of the individuals. We should be part of the solution rather than the problem. So I'm grateful for this discussion today. So nice to see so many Scottish people in the room and showing global solidarity and allyship for everybody that's here and expressed their views. So thank you.
I'm also aware that we have BBC here, and I'm also aware that the BBC is media accredited, so they are allowed to ask questions if they wish to.
I'll take that as a no.
Can I come back on the point from the last speaker? I just wanted to come back on the point from you from the last speaker, and it's just to say that my lived experience is the exact same as yours, that as soon as you do corporate law, really it's London, particularly listing companies, because we lost our stock exchange. And then I went into global insurance for a FTSE 100 company, and again, you're the only woman and you're certainly the only Scot. And there is a brain drain, and it is a massive problem.
Can I come back on just that point? One of the disadvantages of having no local media in Scotland is there is a massive brain drain and creative industry drain. Anyone who wants to go into film or television moves to London, because that's where all the decisions are made, where all the programmes are made. And I've been to London many times. You hear lots of Scottish accents, but they just don't happen to be working on television in Scotland.
Thank you. I invite BBC to perhaps limit to 2 questions, since we should conclude soon.
Yeah, it's working? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So I was particularly interested in what other types of work does GBTI do, and is it like your first experience in defending a nation which you consider a colonized one? Do you have had any similar experiences before? How do you plan to achieve these goals in the UN?
Sure.
Okay, maybe the best way to respond to this is to say the road for decolonization through the UN process is largely unexplored, not just by practitioners, lawyers, but also by academics. There are a lot which can be said in a substantive manner about decolonization, the right to self-determination, but very little you can find how practically you can achieve it. We heard from representatives of Tamil community that they spent decades trying to reach somewhere, and their path does not take them anywhere except just going around. I would rather say like in a vicious circle. And I think the way how you can actually achieve something and find the light in the end of the tunnel on the way for decolonization for any peoples who would like to bring their concern and grievances to international community is to get from United Nations, the officials of the United Nations, a bit of clarity how to get there. It happened to be that I used to be an official of the United Nations for more than 10 years. And it happened to be that I know a little bit how the organization functions. And I think that actually helps me quite a lot to advise and navigate Liberation Scotland and Salva through the, I would call it the UN protocols, UN mechanisms, and also in a way UN bureaucracy. So at the moment we identify a clear path and we are going to that to achieve our goal. And our goal is simple. All we want Scotland to be considered by the Fourth Committee of General Assembly. We are planning to submit full-fledged, in addition to our submissions that we already made to the C24, we are planning to submit a full-fledged petition. And this full-fledged petition will go as soon as we will have a solid ground and identify. I mean, for this process, it takes only one state to sponsor the resolution. To sponsor the resolution that would be put forward for the consideration by the Fourth Committee, and then this Fourth Committee would take it further to the General Assembly. And as a matter of fact, given the experience with French Polynesia, which was relisted into the list for decolonization in 2013, there is no need to get a consent from the administering power. So in that case it was France, and in case of Scotland it would be United Kingdom. So all will depend on the international community. But again, as we all discuss it again and again, that our efforts are just complementary. Nobody can give or provide the right to self-determination to Scottish people. It's an inalienable right. It's the right that Scottish people must exercise themselves. So what we are doing, we are just helping them to go through the UN process and bring their concerns through the civic organizations and grievances to the United Nations, to the attention of international community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Do we have a final question from the BBC?
I think that's it. Any questions? Yes, one more. So that's all right. I mean,
yes.
Whoever would be willing to answer this one. So considering the Tamil example, for instance, or other example of nations which were considered not self-governing or colonized, and the fact that they has not been their efforts to become independent has not been that successful in the recent years. Why do you precisely consider your effort in the UN bring the result you're working for? Why precisely the UN? Why this path?
Shall we circle back? Then, yeah.
I just wanted to mention the previous question related to why, in a sense, the liberation movement evolved in Scotland because of the failure of the political process. Up until the devolution period, the Scottish National Party would have claimed independence with a majority of seats in the Westminster Parliament for Scotland. That has been achieved 3 times since devolution. So we have elected nationalist majorities 3 times in Westminster and 3 times in Scotland in the devolved. So 6 nationalist majorities, but they have refused to declare independence. And in post-colonial theory, Frantz Fanon writes about this extensively. Frantz Fanon from Martinique, he writes about this. He writes about this as the lack of courage at the decisive moment. The lack of courage at the decisive moment. So the national party we have once devolution happened, it becomes part of the system. The politicians become part of the system. And then they take their foot off the gas for independence. So they become part of the colonial system. And that's what's happened. But we've elected 6 majorities. So what we are here for now, with the liberation movement, which is non-political, is a failure of the political process. So the politicians in Scotland have delayed independence. They have become part of the system. And in post-colonial theory, this creates problems. And it creates also the potential for conflict. This delay for independence is creating the potential for conflict. So Scotland already has the right. It has, politically, it's de facto independent. It has 6 majorities for independence, including in 2015, 56 of 59 MPs, 95% of MPs. And Scotland was only brought into the treaty with 65%, 67% of MPs. So it's a failure of the political process. We have already voted for independence 6 times. So we are denied independence not only by Westminster, but our nationalist politicians who are now retiring on colonial pensions, I would say. So that is the system, and that's what post-colonial theory predicts happens. So that's why the liberation movement is created by the people. It's non-political. It's because the political process has failed. The politicians elected nationalist majorities now 6 times have failed to declare independence, as is their right to end the treaty, which is no longer in the interests.
I hope that also answers your second question. You probably have to. Oh, okay. All right. Well.
So your question was, after all these countries have failed to obtain their independence using this route, although actually I would say, if you look very carefully, the number of countries that were able to pursue that route is very limited. But I'd also say that if you take a good look at the world around you and you don't recognise that the old world order is changing, people are no longer content to accept it, and are no longer content to allow what I think it was generously called political pragmatism, to run, to be in charge of the, to decide what decisions are made. We're seeing the cost of that. The whole world is aware of that. I think we're on the edge of a change, and either the old world order is going to increase its grip, and it's kind of the end of human rights, actually, if that's what happens, or we're on the edge of a big shift. And the self-determination of nations like Scotland, and from Scotland to Hawaii to the Caribbean to Sri Lanka to across the world, those rights become real and realised, or we continue under this, as I said, this old world order, which I think probably gives the planet a very limited future.
We've now reached the end of our conference, and I pass the floor to our founder for his concluding remarks.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you all. I noticed the time is running late. I must confess I have some experience in running session or discussion more than 4 hours without having any break. But this one is almost close to the limit. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It has been a very fruitful discussion this morning. And in fact, the IBSA, being the acronym of our body called the International Pro Bono Legal Services Association, you can judge by its name that we here to provide service as much as we could, although we have limited funding, the majority of which is coming out from philanthropists funding our program. And one of the programs that we run is to provide free legal services to underprivileged class. But that is pretty much a domestic type of services we provide. Seldomly, we host this sort of the international forum to enable serious business to discuss solemn topic at a very esteemed venue. And thank you, Sharaf, for being our partner, a voluntary partner. to pair up with us to run this program, and thank you for all the distinguished speakers who have been providing insights and also very interesting part of the history that is not pretty much well known by other outsiders, so to speak. Especially we coming from Asia. However, I believe that the United Nations is a very good organization where, when it was found, it was supposed to resolve the human problems, human difference in opinions. This is a perfect place for us to open our dialogue, and exactly why it was found. And when Sarah came to thank me for organizing this, in fact, it was our privilege, our honor to be part of this this exercise. And as I said, without Sharaf providing some initial ideas, we would not have known where to begin with. And as what you guys have just mentioned, that you're so happy to see so many Scottish within one room at the United Nations. And in fact, I'm also very fond of the Scottish shortbread, as well as the Scotch or whiskey, the Ballantines. Very, very nice, actually.
Maybe a record.
Maybe a record, right?
The most number of Scots.
You'll be happy to know that we have a presentation for you later.
Oh, thank you very much. So, all in all, as Jun has prepared me the closing speech, he highlighted, some solution ahead or some pointer. I think, recognition, acknowledgement, and are important first steps. But they are not just themselves the remedies. We need patience. We need continuous efforts to make our view known and to make other sides, persuade and accept one's position. And eventually, what is the last core of the entire exercise is that keep on talking, and somebody as a third party, independent party, play a neutral role to mediate the differences and disputes between parties. I trust and I believe, being a civilized, in a civilized world, anything can be just resolved through a peaceful dialogue. But just don't jumpstart anything. We got to learn to be patient, and we got to learn to hear other sides, view, and try to accommodate with each other. If not this one, what would be otherwise? We have so many atrocities in the world already. The Palestinians case, the Tamil or whatever, and the Egyptians, even Chinese. We have also gone through a long walk to go through the ordeal, and eventually we found our way to resolve the problem. So if the Chinese government nowadays can take us to a better, I would not say perfect, a better living standard, I think some experience could be borrowed. And in our country, we have 56 different ethnic minorities and tribes, and also different types of people. So I think all these are invaluable experience for everybody to understand, not to learn, just to understand how we make it. So I once again, I would think that in a community we have the shared future, and we can do it together. And as a last bit of the promotion for Hong Kong, UN has just entrusted or imposed a duty on Hong Kong to set up an international organization for mediation, so-called to mention the name correct, International Organization for Mediation. Now, I think this may be a good starting point for each other to make their own case known. And if possible, we mediate and resolve it. Not even have to resolve it to the court. Of course, we also have the International Court of Justice. And this is also one of the arms and one of the organs of the United Nations. Now we have to entrust the court with power so that once mediation cannot work out, something has to be adjudged. And once the judgment or the decision is attained, then we all have to follow. And that's the name of the game, the rule of law. And so therefore, I think today's discussion is invaluable. And it has given me a lot of stuff to learn. And thank you once again. Although June has said that our cocktail reception has been cancelled, we still have some cakes or shortbread outside, right?
That's all gone.
All gone. And we have to go to the restaurant, grab some food before it's too late. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Do you think Scotland would be welcome as an independent country?
I think so, yes. Why not?